I'm Darren.
I'm Derek,
And this is the Double D Podcast.
We have got a great interview today. I'm very excited about this one. This is someone who we've talked about an awful lot on this podcast, has a great history in Battle on the Border. Why don't you introduce yourself?
This is the Unchained King, Brandon Day.
Now, the last time, first off, thank you for doing this. We appreciate it. We know you're a busy guy, got a lot going on. So we appreciate you taking the time out to do this with us. First off, we have to ask, because the last time a lot of the BOTB brigade seen you, it was in your match against Paxton. So for those that don't remember, or who weren't there at the shows, you did get a victory over Paxton Calloway. However, it was by DQ, so you did not win the title. Talk to us about your thoughts after that. I mean, it has to be nice to knock Paxton Calloway off. You know, he had a great win streak going on, so you gave him his first loss in a while, but you did not get the title. So how are you feeling after that match?
You know, I'm feeling pretty good. He's a big, strong, tough guy, but I have been around the block quite a few times. He's not the biggest, the strongest, or the baddest I've ever faced. And to get a win and to earn myself another shot at the title, that's all I can really ask for, and get to do it. You know, historically now, New Year's Eve has been a good night for me at Battle on the Border. So I'm looking to double up on that and take the title with me the next time.
You know, as you mentioned, Paxton Calloway we talked about this on the review of Armageddon. We talked about his list of people that he's faced, and you're up there with some of the toughest, if not the toughest, competition that he has. I mean, he's had just recently the 7-footer, the American Giant, but he's had Shane Mercer, Benjamin Chimera. He's had some big people, but you're in my opinion, you're one of the top lists. Now, as you mentioned, you do have a match coming up with them on New Year's Eve Bash. Now, obviously, I'm not going to ask you for a game plan, because I know we've done enough interviews. I know no one gives us a game plan, even though I'd love that scoop, you know. But we don't get that lucky. So, however, here's what I will say. I will ask this question. He does have Bobby Fulton on his side. Does that add anything into your game planning when you go into a match like that, when you have someone like Bobby Fulton out there?
Well, and first and foremost, I have the utmost respect for Bobby Fulton. Him as a, just as a wrestler in the ring, he was somebody that I watched. I worked for Bobby Fulton years ago. I mean, honestly, it was probably 20 years ago. I wrestled for him in an event in Virginia. So I've interacted with him for a long time. But I'm not going to be alone. You know, I'm going to have Paris McQueen with me. I'm going to have Talboy with me. So it's not like he's going to be able to get anything over on the three of us. It's just going to be down to me and all 7 feet and 400 pounds of Paxton Calloway. And I like my odds.
So it's good you mentioned Paris McQueen and Talboy. If you don't mind me asking, where did you find Talboy and Paris McQueen at? Because for a long time in Battle on the Border, when we seen you were by yourself, and then you came back, and not only did you have Paris McQueen, you have Talboy now. Where did you find these guys at?
So they are both my students. Paris McQueen is the first graduate of the Unchained Wrestling Academy. She is really starting to spread her wings on her own and become her own person as a professional wrestler, which is an amazing thing for me. Talboy, you know, he's not there yet, but he's getting there. He's getting better in the ring. I'm starting to trust him a little bit more. But for right now, he's there to carry my bags, towel my face, and Paris is there to open the ropes for me and make sure that all I have to do is focus on winning wrestling matches, and I don't have to deal with any of the exterior stuff that comes up with being me.
Right. Yeah, it definitely adds in having Paris McQueen and Talboy out there. You know, we've seen Talboy. Speaking of Paris McQueen, she has a match. She has a match on the 31st, correct?
Yes, she is facing Ari Alexander, I believe.
So we've seen her last time. We've seen she's had a match with Shauna. She had a little bit of a feud there with Shauna. She believe she was robbed out of getting the title, and now Ari Alexander's. That's two big matches for her. She has impressed, obviously, BOTB management to get matches like that right out of the jump. We talk about it on the podcast here. I mean, I do think that realistically she could be, in a year, she could easily be champion.
Oh, yeah.
So it has to be extremely, it has to be hats off to you for training her. She's doing an amazing job so far.
Yeah, I'm super proud of her. She's not had an easy road. It has not been just this quick turnaround thing. I mean, she's been putting in work for 2 years to get to this point. So, and I'm not the only one that had a hand in training her. She's comes from my school, but she also trained with Congo Kong for a while. And so she's gotten experience in other places as well. So she's not just a product strictly of, the UWA and what we do, but she's got something. Yeah. She has something that other people don't have. And it's going to be a real treat when we get to see her really find herself as a wrestler and put all the things together. She's doing pretty good right now, and she's going to get better. And that's what's really, really impressive about her.
Absolutely. Sky's the limit. I truly do believe. Although I'm not a huge fan of the tactics that she uses. Hey, you got to give her, it's using her brain. It's smart. Hats off. So I do believe she, very realistically, BOTB Brigade should be looking for, they should be looking at her now. But I do think within a year she could be a serious problem for any woman in that division.
Oh, yeah, easily.
Another guy that you had some problems with in the past, and you've had some friendships with in the past, is Shane Douglas. Now, we've never had the privilege to talk about Shane Douglas. He's recently seemed like he's undergone an attitude change. You don't mind us talking about your partnership with and your rivalry with Shane Douglas, do you?
No, not at all.
So first off, let's start off with, how did you guys become a tag team in Battle on the Border?
It started with, we could really go back a long way. So this is not anything that I didn't share, especially at his Hall of Fame induction. I said all of this stuff, but Shane Douglas is my hero. He always has been. He has been my guy. We have the Mount Rushmore of pro wrestling, and everybody puts their, it's usually some combination of Hogan, Flair, Rock, Austin, etc. Right? That's the top four. But when you come down to, okay, but who was your favorite? Who did you look to the most, and especially as a wrestler, who did you look to and draw inspiration from the most? For me, it was Shane Douglas. My first introduction to him was in around 93, when he and Ricky Steamboat won the unified WCW NWA World Tag Team titles. And I followed him from there to being Dean Douglas. I followed him to ECW, where he really became himself when he became a franchise. And for someone like me, I did grow up on the 80s stuff. I did grow up on the 90s stuff. But as a teenager, and as I was getting into the wrestling business, ECW was at its height. And Shane was in the absolute dead center of all that, with Taz, who I also trained with, which is something that caused some issues between the three of us in the past. But so he was always somebody that I looked up to, always someone that I wanted to get in the ring with. I wanted to be able to learn from, just be able to sit under the learning tree of the guy who I considered to be a revolutionary force in wrestling. And there's, rumor, innuendo, conspiracy, whatever, that someone at WWE basically ripped off Shane and changed his entire persona to match what Shane was doing in ECW. And I fully believe that. It's too similar to not have been something that was done purposefully. And so Shane and he never gets the credit that he deserves for being as a fantastic professional wrestler, as a talker, all the things that he did in wrestling is not the same. today if Shane Douglas doesn't exist. If Shane Douglas doesn't throw down the NWA world title and claim the ECW the world title, we're in a different wrestling business. And so that has always been something I've wanted my entire life, and I got the opportunity to meet him. It would have been somewhere in the early 2010s, and able to to tell him how important he was to me, and he was incredibly gracious about it. And I learned so much from him, and that was really what got built out of that. He watched me. I mean, we did, I had a heavyweight title match against Madman Fulton, I believe it was. And Fulton had to throw everything he had at me to put me away. I don't remember exactly the circumstances, but I kept getting up, and finally slapped him in the face, and he was able to finish me off after that, because you can't win them all. But Shane saw that. He saw something in me, and we became the franchise players at that point. And so I got to mentor under and learn from my hero, which I've gotten to do more than once in this crazy sport. So it's just it was a really incredible experience. However, I love Shane. I love him to death. There's nothing I want more for him than success. But at a certain point, a man's legacy becomes in question when he's going toe-to-toe with guys that shouldn't even be able to lace his boots. And I didn't want that for Shane. I didn't want him to fade away in the feebleness of indie wrestling. He deserves better than that. And so I took it upon myself to try and give him a warrior's death, send him out on his shield like he deserved to be, make him become the franchise. That's who I wanted to fight. I didn't want to fight the Shane Douglas that was at the tail end of his career, getting a last hurrah. I wanted to fight the Shane Douglas that broke Gary Wolf's neck. I wanted to fight the Shane Douglas that threw down the NWA world title, that, defeated Bam Bam Bigelow against all odds and ended up in the hospital afterwards. That's the guy that I wanted to fight. And in order to get that out of him, you had to poke the bear a little bit. And I think I found him. I think I found him in that dog collar match that we had last New Year's. He became the franchise Shane Douglas again, even for a minute. Yeah. And then he fell exactly like I wanted him to. So it's fitting that I got to do something so incredible with someone who means so much to me. And maybe that's spun his mind a little bit, maybe he's starting to think that being for lack of a better word, being a goody two shoes in today's world isn't going to cut it. And he needs every advantage he can get. He taught me that. I learned that from him. So if anybody could understand that, that's him, and maybe it's helped him remember.
I was going to say, first off, that was a great story. I absolutely loved hearing about that. And I do think that he's kind of, because since that dog collar match specifically, what we've seen is Shane Douglas start to kind of go back to his ways, where we've seen him trick Jeff King a couple times into getting, believing that they were friends or closer. We've seen some low blows. We've seen a newer, a newer in a sense Shane Douglas, but it's the older Shane Douglas, which is I think, again, I'm not a huge fan of the tactics of the low blows and stuff, but I mean, sometimes that's what I feel like that's what he's used to, or should be used to. I feel like he was trying to be someone else for so long. Now he's back to his old ways, and I think that's could be a huge key to success. And who knows? I mean, Shane, he's not going to retire anytime soon, despite his age. And I do think that he could be someone who holds a title very soon in Battle on the Border. A hardcore title. I mean, who knows what could happen? It could even be for if you win that world title, Brandon, he might be coming after you. I don't know. I mean, I don't know. For him, he could do anything. I mean, really.
I would welcome the opportunity to defend a championship against Shane Douglas. Like, it's not just for the sake of my, career and keeping my spot or whatever you want to call it, but I mean, that's a bucket list item, and I've been privileged to check off a number of things on that list over the last 24-ish years. Some of them are never going to happen, which is unfortunate. It's just, the way things go. But that was the biggest one, was being able to get in the ring with him, share the ring with him, learn from him, and eventually beat him.
I mean, let's dive into that a little bit. You mentioned you had 24 years of experience in the business. What made you, first off, you kind of mentioned it before, but let's just cover it a little bit. What made you a fan of professional wrestling specifically? Do you have like a specific first memory of professional wrestling, or has it just kind of been involved in your whole life?
So it's really strange. I told this story not too long ago. So we're sitting here in the beginning of, my birthday is December 14th. So born 2 weeks before Christmas. It was my second Christmas. So I was a year and 2 weeks old. And there's a tape somewhere, a VHS tape somewhere, of me patiently waiting. I had gotten one of those My Buddy dolls for Christmas. And the video is of me just waiting patiently, my little overalls or my Christmas sweater or whatever it is that I'm wearing. My dad or my granddad is using his pocket knife to cut it out of the box. And he hands it to me, and I slam it on the ground and jump on it to pin it.
Oh, nice.
So before I was old enough to articulate the thought of what do you want to be when you grow up, I already knew that that's all I wanted to do.
Yeah.
I have flashes of different things that pop up. I have this flash of, I think when I went to an NWA WCW TV taping in Roanoke, Virginia, when I was like 3 or 4, and remember seeing the Road Warriors and Sting and Luger and I want to say Ivan Koloff. And then being really confused when I went to watch wrestling on TV the other day and saw all the same stuff, didn't understand how they did it again. But it was a TV taping, so I didn't understand that right. TV wasn't even live at that point in time. Yeah. And it's just been my obsession and my passion for as long as I could possibly remember. There's never been anything else that even comes close to it. I think if I had grown up somewhere else, I love hockey. I love hockey second or maybe third to wrestling and jiu-jitsu. Maybe I would have been a hockey player if I grew up where that was a thing. But it wasn't. So I was all in on pro wrestling from day one, basically.
I mean, it's crazy having being 1 year old or 2 years old and already getting your first victory. I mean, that was your first win as an adult right there. I mean, that's impressive. This is start that win streak off early.
Yeah, well, it was my last one for a while. So,
so obviously, besides that moment when you were that 1 year old or 2 year old kid getting that pin, what made you? When did you know that you wanted to be a professional wrestler? Around what age? And then what steps did you take to get to that point? Because there's some people out there who you hear, who some of them even start training, at 15, 16 years old, but they want to be a professional wrestler, but maybe they don't even know how to go about that route. So what was your road to finally getting into wrestling training?
So I stayed obsessed with wrestling my whole life. It's all I ever wanted to do. There was a local promoter. I grew up in Stuart Strath, Virginia. It's a small town, 300 kids in my high school when I graduated high school. I graduated high school with kids that I started kindergarten with, so not a big place. But there was a wrestler and a wrestling promoter that lived in town. So I was 15 years old. I managed to get in front of him and train a little bit in his backyard. I mean, we didn't even have a ring. I was literally throwing drop kicks in grass. And that kind of went away. and then it was, right after I turned 16, promotion was running an event. I mean, basically walking distance from my house at that point. And they had Steve Carino on the event. And this was Carino prior to the blonde hair, prior to like the big push that he ended up getting in ECW. Yep. But I was just a fan of his shtick, his work. Like, I thought it was interesting. Even as, a 16-year-old kid, I realized like there was something different about him, being an ECW, but being an anti-ECW guy. Like, that was cool to me. I was one of the only people that attended that event. There was maybe 20, 30 people in the crowd. But that place had a training school. And so I emailed the guy at that point. I don't really like to say their name too much because wasn't a great experience by the time it was all said and done. Right. But I did end up training there for 2 years. Mickey James was there. That's where she trained. So she was about a year and a half ahead of me. Sanjay Dutt came in a couple months after I did. So we all trained together for that amount of time. I was there for that whole 2 years. Sanjay was kind of there that whole 2 years, but he was able to start wrestling and traveling because he was a couple years older. Virginia's a regulated state, so you had to be 18 to get a wrestling license there. So I wrestled a little bit between 16, 17 until I was 18. And then after 18, I was on the road as often as possible. And, I kind of was part of the first generation of wrestling school trainees. That wasn't a thing before the early 2000s. Right. Like, you couldn't just find wrestling schools. They didn't exist. The indie scene was very sparse at that point. And really the indie scene developed after that because there was nothing left but WWE by like 2001. So it was a very interesting time to get into the wrestling business. And I had some people that looked out for me, and then I had some people that just beat the shit out of me because they could, and I was a kid and they were adults. Right. And it toughened me up. It taught me a lot of things that I keep with me to this day. Probably could have done things differently, and my path might have been differently at that point, but that's all I wanted to do was wrestle. So I worked at McDonald's to pay for my wrestling school, and I drove about 2.5 hours one way to get to that wrestling school 2 or 3 times a week.
You ever look back like any times recently, you just look back on that track, you just think, how did I do it back then? Or did you, you're not surprised you did it because you loved it so much, but it's just so much work to put into doing something. And I guess that shows that you love it though, right? If you're dedicated to something, you're going to,
it was that or nothing,
right?
Like it was either there was nowhere else to go. There was maybe one other training school or 2 other training schools in the state at that point, and I didn't know that. I didn't know where they were. I think it was around the time when Shawn Michaels training school opened up, and that's what I was looking at because I could see it advertised, in PWI. Right. And like, all right, that's when I'm 18, that's what I'm going to do. And I managed to be able to jump the gun and, start when I was 16 or 15 and 16 and go from there.
Right. Do you remember the first, what did wrestling training meet your expectations? Was it harder than you expected or even easier than you expected? Did it live up to the anticipation you had going into it?
It was an interesting experience. We'll put it that way. I don't mean this to sound, however it's going to sound, but I took to pro wrestling really easily. Right. Like I had been studying it literally my entire life. Right. So when I got shown how to do something, I could do it. Mm-hmm. Typically right away. And I I took to it really quickly. I excelled very quickly. We focused a lot on chain wrestling at my school, especially early on, which was one of the few things that I think they did really well for me was they set me up for success in that regard, where I knew how to wrestle. I knew how to exchange holds. I knew how to get up and down off the mat and all those types of things. And if you can do that, you can wrestle. You can have a match. You can go out somewhere and not embarrass yourself. You can handle problems when the ring breaks. You can do anything if you can do those things. Yeah. And so that was really, really beaten into me early on, and I enjoyed that part of it. I always kind of foresaw myself as this mat technician type guy, and that's what I was gravitating towards at that time. Like Dean Malenko was a big inspiration for me. Any guys that could just mat wrestle like that. At the same time, I was dealing with grown-ups, and I was a child. So I was not mature enough to handle the clashing of personalities and egos, or just the politics of wrestling that have always existed, where it didn't look good for the 30-year-old guy that was all jacked up but couldn't wrestle his way out of a paper bag to get shown up by the 16-year-old skinny fat kid with glasses and pimples. That wasn't an easy thing for those guys to deal with. And it wasn't everybody, it was just a couple people, but the end result of that was just basically me being assaulted on a weekly basis and never knowing why. I think there's a time and a place to put someone in their place physically, in life in general, but in wrestling especially. Right. But they need to know why. Because how else are you going to teach somebody? And I think that was what was missing out of my wrestling training. Again, not from everybody, but at various times it was just, what's he going to do? So it's something that I've taken to heart now in my training. I don't want to make the same mistakes that people made with me. If one of my students messes up, he's going to know he messed up. He's going to know he messed up right away. And I'm going to tell him how to fix it. But I'm going to do that with respect for their health and safety. Maybe not their mental health. That's up to everybody else on how they deal with criticism. But that's something that I can't abide. And it's something that's not, it's not doable in pro wrestling anymore. You can't get away with that. You can't get away with that in life. So, that old guard of just roughing guys up because you can, or because they're green or whatever, it shouldn't exist anymore.
Yeah, it's interesting. Our last interview, we had Benjamin Chimera on, and we had that discussion came up too about when he was coming up, how tough it was, and how people who are coming up today have it a little bit easier. And he is in agreement with you, and he was like, well, obviously you can't go back to how it was when I was training, but there also needs to be a little bit more discipline than there is in some training schools. And, it's something, it's weird because the world has changed so much so fast, and it's impossible to do, and you shouldn't do, like you said, what you used to be able, or what you could do then. But also there's something where did they go too far almost, and like now there's a middle ground somewhere that should be met, where it's okay for get a little bit of the old thing, get a little bit of the new thing, and that's like the perfect concoction, if you will, like a training school.
Yeah, I think so, and I hope that my guys would echo that. There's never been an opportunity, or there's never been a time period where they've been taken advantage of. That this is, when we get into what pro wrestling is, like, there's a lot of trust involved. And there's a lot of physicality, and there's a lot of stuff that can go really, really wrong. And that's the thing that gets me. I used to be really, really angry all the time about a lot of things when it came to wrestling, and I've kind of softened a lot over the years, just realizing that some of that is my baggage to carry, not anybody else's to deal with. But when someone is dangerous,
right,
unnecessarily so, I do not tolerate it. It's not something that should be tolerated, and I think that's a definitive line that I draw all the time. You know, if my guys do something that, you know, merits a punishment, if you want to call it that, right, we're going to do drills till they throw up, and that, I think, serves a much better purpose than stretching somebody or hurting somebody or leaving a mark on somebody that they got to go into regular life with. You know, it was hard for me to explain how I had boot laces imprinted up my back at school when I was 17 years old. You know what I mean? Yeah. That's not a thing that, and it happened at wrestling practice. Nobody believed that. Like, what a stupid thing to say. Like, that can't be true. You're not a pro wrestler. You're not trained to be a pro wrestler. You know, and that's a thing that happened to me. And it wasn't right then. It's not right now. And I don't want that to be the case. I want to, you know, despite what anybody may think of me and what anybody may see from me when they watch me come out, especially at a Battle on the Border event, I want to leave professional wrestling better than I found it.
That's a great answer. I love that. I love hearing that. And I think there are a lot of people who came from your generation of training who are leaving wrestling in a better, safer place. And appreciate you for that, because I mean, for a while there, wrestling did have a really bad connotation with it. Like, when certain people thought about professional wrestling, it was only negative things, and now wrestling has kind of transcended that. It's a little bit more of a mainstream sport. You know, it basically is treated the same as a mainstream sport like football or baseball. So, and I think the reason is because there are people who have better intentions than some of the older guard does. And of course, again, you couldn't get here without the older guard. So it's one of those weird things where if you didn't have that, you wouldn't have this. But I think it is hopefully going to be left in a better place. And I think the strides are being made for that, for sure. So like I said, we know you're a busy guy. We don't want to keep you for too much longer, but I do have two more questions. But the first one is, do you remember your first match? And if so, what were your thoughts then? And then what are your thoughts now looking back?
So my first match was a tag team match, and I was 16 years old. I was tagging with a guy who the only name I ever knew him by was Germs. Okay. I have no idea what his real name was. He was already training when I got there, but he didn't last very much longer after this. And we wrestled a referee, okay. A big, and I honestly, I hope he's still alive. He was kind of an older guy then. This was 2000. Pat Lawson, he was dressed in tie-dye overalls, and a guy who went by the name of Scotty Mayhem, who was a legitimate, like, 6'7" guy. Like, if you picture the wall, that was kind of exactly what he looked like, except he wasn't the wall. He probably could have been the wall if anybody had seen him in time. Right. And we just got the shit kicked out of us, you know, for a good 5 to 8 minutes. And then my partner got beat with a heart punch from the tie-dye clad overweight referee. So it was not exactly the not the start that you would think you would want for your pro wrestling career. But at the same time, I wouldn't have traded it for anything in the moment. I was just so happy to be able to get in front of an audience of any kind and have a real match. And the only reason I was able to do so is because the commission didn't show up that night. Because otherwise I wouldn't have been able to wrestle because I didn't have a license. So
Right. Thank God they didn't, right? I mean, so bouncing off of that, you've had, I mean, I don't know, maybe, do you know how many matches you've had in your career, roughly, at least?
And over 1,000.
So in those over 1,000 matches in your career, do you have a particular favorite, whether it be the best that you performed or the best story or whatever it was? Do you have a specific match that you look back on? I'm listening. I'm not insinuating at all that you're getting close to the end of your career, but do you have one that you will look back on at this moment and think that's like the crown jewel moment of my career?
There are different things that pop out to me when I think, because somebody asked me this the other day, and I gave one answer, and then I thought about it a little bit longer, and I don't know if I feel as definitively about it or not. I think the dog collar match with Shane Douglas was a bucket list item, and for emotional reasons and for personal reasons and for the fact that I nearly bled to death, like, that is up there as one of my favorite things that I got to do, because it's something I had been dreaming about for so long. I did in 2013, I was a part of a program where myself and Aiden Chambers, who was also a Team Taz dojo guy, that's where we met, wrestled a tag team of Jeff Early and Zach Hilton for Fusion Wrestling in Virginia. And we ended up doing a 60-minute Iron Man match that we spent a lot of time preparing for. I mean, just months of regimented training and cardio and all these different things to get ready for this match, and really knocked it out of the park. You know, like, just, we didn't have this slow-paced 60-minute match. I mean, we went at it for 60 minutes. And, you know, I don't think, especially with all of the things that took place, I mean, and I separated my shoulder like 2 weeks before that happened too, so I was dealing with a lot of different things just going into that. But we pulled something off basically by ourselves. You know, we sold out a building based on what we were going to do, not what was going on the rest of the card, and delivered on it. So, I mean, that's a big one for me, because as far as just my in-ring work, I think it sets the tone for the kind of performer that I am, and the attention to detail, for lack of a better term, that I have. You know, those are big ones for me. And, you know, I think also there's probably some others that I'm missing out on. You know, winning the War Wrestling title from Aaron Williams, also in a dog collar match. I don't know if you guys are catching on, but I'm pretty good at dog collar matches. That was a big moment for me, because it was just kind of the culmination of, you know, War Wrestling has been my home for ever since I came into this area in 2017. And when I got here, I was not in a good place, physically, mentally, emotionally, any of that kind of stuff. And I had kind of spent a year not focused on wrestling. And so I had to claw my way back into that mindset of focusing on pro wrestling again. And, you know, just really just a fantastic story, you know, kind of that we got to tell. And I got to tell that story for like 3 years, you know, and that match was kind of in the middle of all that. So I'm really proud of that. I mean, Aaron Williams is one of the best professional wrestlers I've ever touched. So, I mean, that's a whole other subject as far as how good he is. You know, those are, you know, three that come to mind right away that I think are really important and special in my career.
Love to hear it. Aaron Williams is a name we hear a lot too when we talk to people about if they've graced it. If they've had a match with him, they mention that always is up at the top. And I've seen him wrestle plenty of times. He is one of the. It's crazy to me that he's not. There's a lot of people, and Brandon, you're included on this list. In all seriousness, of people who, when I see them, I'm always just shocked that they're not on TV or just, it's just insane to me how wrestling works. I mean, I'm not going to name names of people who are on TV who shouldn't. Not that they would hear this, but there are certain people who are on TV, whether it be AEW or WWE, who should not be there. And then there are people who I get to see, Brandon Day, Carson Drake, Aaron Williams, people like that who, just to name it, the first three that popped into my head, those are people. You guys are people who should be on TV or just, and you guys are doing great stuff in the indie scene. There's no doubt about it. It's just that there's that little I just want to see them. And I think there's a chance. There was a chance we will, and I think we will. But man, it's just crazy how wrestling works sometimes. There's certain people who just, I mean, that's a rabbit hole we could go down, I'm sure.
Oh yeah, it's crazy to me that you ask about wrestling training. I think the thing that I was shocked about when I got into wrestling, and it took a while for me to realize it, but the best wrestlers are not the ones that succeed.
Right.
Typically, and that actually has very little to do with whether they're successful or not. And I said this. Bob Evans posted something the other day. What was the biggest mistake you ever made in pro wrestling that you can legally cop to? And for me, it was not playing football in high school and college.
Right. Because
at the era that I came into wrestling, that would have served me so much better than having already been wrestling for 4 years. Because you needed a pedigree of some kind, because WWE was the only game in town. So if you weren't already a bodybuilder, you had to have some kind of background to get on their radar in order to get a job. And, I spent all that time learning how to wrestle, which has been valuable. Right. But I'd have been better off playing football or bodybuilding for 4 years and then getting into wrestling at that point.
It's crazy how, like I said, it's such a crazy sport how wrestling works, and it's one of the reasons why I love it. And there's also days where I just don't understand it, and I think that'll never change from the sounds of it. Last question again. Thank you for doing this, but last question. I don't know if Paxton watches this podcast. He might. He's also a busy man. He's someone who's had an amazing 2024. If Paxton is watching this though, or any Paxton fans or Bobby Fulton, whoever it may be, do you have a message to send to him?
Yeah, shine my belt up.
Ooh. Man, I mean that's straight to the point. I like it. We've had people on here who talk for, they say a lot of words, and I don't know what the meaning is afterwards. But that right there, I know what that means. I know what that means.
Very cool.
And hey, listen, like I said, I'm really looking forward to New Year's Eve Bash. Is going to be a great show, December 31st, River's Edge Indoor Sports Complex. Oh, yeah. I'm super excited. Like you said before. You've had a lot of success there. It's one of my favorite shows of the year. I think, in fact, we've been working for Battle on the Border now for almost 3. It'll be
3 years.
Yeah. No. Yeah, 3 years.
4 years.
It'll be 4 years coming up coming up here soon. And it has consistently been my top show of like the year after I think of it. Well, it's just kind of funny because it's on the 31st, but it's like on the 1st, if I look back at the year that we just had, and maybe it's recency bias at the time, but I always look back at those shows with great memories, a lot of great stuff. And Brandon Day, your match is going to be, I think people know this, but it's going to tear the house down. Oh, yeah. It's going to be fantastic. I'm looking forward to it. I'm not going to lie, listen, I might be rooting for Paxton, but yeah, you know what? I will say this though. We every time people are on the podcast, we do kind of root for them. So you know what? I changed my answer. If Paxton had ever come on the podcast, maybe I'd root for him. But he's too big time for us. Oh yeah. He thinks he's too big time for us or something. Brandon, can you believe that?
Hey, I'm like a fungus, man. I'll grow on you. Like that's it's a slow burn. It's not. I don't win people over right away. That's never been my strong suit. It's over time.
No, and all.
Ensure that we play his music this time.
Yeah, right. And no, in all seriousness, though, I really do. I'm a huge fan of yours. I do think you're. I look forward to your matches in Battle on the Border. When I see you're on the card, I'm always excited, and I can't wait to see you. Well, before we let you go, do you have anything that you want to say or promote before you? I don't know what your plans are for the day, but I'm sure they're entertaining and exciting. I don't have anything planned on my day. I'm gonna go home and probably take a nap because that's the kind of person I am, Brandon. You're not that kind of person. What do you have?
No,
What do you have? What do you have?
no naps for me. No, the things that I have coming up. I mean, obviously, I have my school, the Unchained Wrestling Academy. You can find us on Facebook and Instagram. That is, that's my baby. That's my everything. I've put a lot of time and work into that over the last year. Like I said, Paris is a testament to that. I'm very proud of everything that she does. I've got several more of my guys will be making their debuts soon. One of them will be making his debut at War Wrestling this weekend. So I'm really excited about that and want to keep promoting that and making sure that people especially can start enrolling for 2025. I do a long-term class. I don't do 2 weeks, 3 months, whatever it is. Like when we come in, we agree to train for a year because I think you need that much time to be able to be successful when you go out there in the world. And more importantly, right now, I'm promoting an event that is taking place where my academy is located. It's at Venue 18 in Fostoria, Ohio, on December 21st. Christmas Chaos. We are doing a fundraiser for the Fraternal Order of Police in that area's Shop with a Cop program. Basically, all the money that gets picked up at the door is going to be used to take underprivileged families shopping for the holidays. So that's something that I really feel strongly about. It's an opportunity to give back and do something positive for the community. And it's also an opportunity for a lot of talented wrestlers to have an event and get seen by a new set of eyes. So I'll be wrestling on the event. We have a couple really good matches already announced. We've got Dalton McKenzie is going to face off with Idle Hines in a big, I'm really looking forward to that one because I feel like it's going to be this like Brody Hansen, All Japan 94 type thing. We've got Brandon Beretta, who is out of Bob Orton's school in St. Louis and is wrestling for NWA Exodus and OVW, is going to be taking on David Light, who's a phenomenal young talent who hasn't been in the business very long, who has a gymnast background, and it's just going to be a really complete contrast in styles that I'm excited for. We've also got Orlando Christopher and Josh Morris going at it, two very evenly matched guys as far as physicality goes, but Orlando has a ton of experience on him. So, we're going to have, I believe, 7 total matches. We haven't announced all of the matches or all of the talent yet. But I really want to put as many butts in seats for that event as possible to raise as much money as we can. And that information is all available on Facebook on the event page or through my personal Facebook page or the Academy's Facebook page. So just want to encourage anybody. It's pay what you can donation. We're encouraging at least a $5 donation, but it's pay what you can. So it's next to nothing to come and see an awesome wrestling event and also be able to, give back and give a little something to a good charity. Plus, it's at a bar. So, the bar will be open. So we're going to have a good mix of, I hope, of kind of hardcore wrestling fans as well as kids and families to enjoy everything that we're going to do for that event.
That's awesome. And for people who are watching this, we'll make sure to link that in the description below. So if you wanted to go, we'll have those details down below. Well, Brandon, like I said, I appreciate you doing this. And if you ever want to come on, just let us know. We'll be happy to have you again, man.
Oh, for sure.
Awesome, guys. Thank you guys so much. I will see you guys in a couple weeks.
Yep. See you on the 31st.
Thank you.